This video is brought to you by my new album entitled Dougal's Treats. It's full of hummable melodies, bluesy riffs and the occasional bit of virtuoso flashy stuff as well. If you enjoy bluesy rock guitar with memorable tunes and solos that wail like a banshee, then check out the links in the description. The premium version includes all of the tabs for each tune, videos and jam tracks as well. Thanks for listening. Now on with the show. Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. Let's talk about 80s rock for a moment, shall we? It conjures up a certain mental image, doesn't it? Poodle-permed, bleached, blonde hair, spandex attire, and everything from the guitars to sometimes the poodle-permed hair in neon day-glow colours. And the sound is pretty much identifiable. You can hear when something was recorded in the 80s, that production that was everywhere with the big gated reverbs on the drums a la Phil Collins, and you know that stereo chorus on everything, and just you know that iconic sort of 80s sound that seemed to be everywhere. But if we dial it back a decade to the 1970s, it's a little bit more diverse, isn't it? And that's what the title of this video is about, or what this video is about rather. It's about why I think the 1970s is probably the golden age of rock music. And I know there's going to be some people who are saying, oh yeah, but you're just some sad old fart who is, you know, reliving his glory days. You were a child in the 70s. Yes, I was a child in the 1970s. But you know what, when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, I wasn't listening to rock music, because that wasn't what 7, 8, 9-year-olds tend to listen to. Certainly wasn't back then anyway. You know, I was listening to Shawaddy Waddy and ABBA and, you know, whatever else was in the top 40. And the thing is, there wasn't a lot of rock music in the top 40, or the hit parade as it was still called then. It was only retrospectively that I discovered rock music and kind of worked my way back in. As I was an adolescent and a teenager in the 1980s, I kind of worked my way back into 70s rock, and I began to realise that this was the decade when rock music came of age. In the 60s, you'd had pop groups and beat groups that grew up a little bit and started putting out, you know, more mature stuff. You know, you can chart the, you know, the evolution of a band like the Beatles from something like Love Me Do to I Am the Walrus, for example. You know, there's that progression there. But it wasn't, I think, until we hit the 1970s that we got this explosion of different genres of the same genre, if you know what I mean. Rock music was very much more a broad church and diverse in the 1970s. And to illustrate that, I've come up with 10 randomly chosen albums from that decade, one from each year, which I think illustrate this. So let's start off with this one, Paranoid by Black Sabbath. You know, it was probably just referred to back then as hard rock or heavy rock. You know, I think we'd got the term heavy metal by then, you know, that famous line from Born to Be Wild. But it was, you know, it was rock music, but it sounded very, very different to an album like this that came out in 71. You know, Led Zeppelin 4, where you've got, you know, obviously Stairway to Heaven, but you've got tracks like Rock and Roll, you know, which hark back to the 1950s. Eddie Cochran could easily have done that song. It would have sounded slightly different, but not markedly different. And then, of course, you know, Battle of Evermore, you know, the kind of folky influence there. Is that the one that Sandy Denny sings on? I can't remember. But, you know, a very different album from this one, which came out in 1972. Still regarded as rock music, Steely Dan's Can't Buy a Thrill. Sophisticated chord sequences, sophisticated chords, fantastic guitar playing from Denny Dias and Elliot Randall. You know, just great music, really, that, you know, this album regularly makes, you know, kind of compilation lists like I'm doing here of great 70s rock albums, but it doesn't sound anything like either of the other two that we've just looked at, does it? But it's still rock music. 73 brought us this album. Can you think of anything else that sounds remotely like this? You know, and obviously Tubular Bells. I don't need to describe what's going on here. We've all heard it. We've all seen at some point The Exorcist and heard this being used as the main theme. Rock music, but that is a very different animal from that and from that, is it not? 1974. One of my favourite albums, Crime of the Century by Supertramp. I don't know why I like this album so much, because there's not a hell of a lot of guitar on it, or prominent guitar. I can't think, is there a song that has a guitar solo on this album? There probably isn't, but I still love the album. It's keyboard, singer-songwriter driven, immaculately produced, and very, very different from everything else we've mentioned so far, but it's still rock music. As is this one. You can't talk about 70s rock without this album here. And everybody knows Bohemian Rhapsody, but some of the other tracks on here, like I'm thinking of that space folk rock thing that, was it the 39 that is I think Brian May is actually a little bit, well, he came across in an interview once as being a little bit aggrieved that this wasn't released as a single off the album. Frankly, it's good enough to have been, but space folk rock, can you think of a space folk rock song on this album? Or on this album? You can't, can you? So you get the point I'm making. All of these albums, they're all rock music, but they're all very different, as is this one, 1976, brought us the Boston debut album. I would have to say, it's a fantastic album, but it is the only album by Boston that you need. The follow-up album, Don't Look Back, patchy. One or two good tracks on it, but this one is all killer, no filler. And the guitar sounds and the production on this were like nothing anyone had ever heard before, and it sort of perhaps set the stage for what was to come in the 80s with that heavily processed guitar sound. I mean, the Boston guitar sound ended up being the Tom Scholz Rockman guitar tone, which was everywhere in the 80s. And you could make the argument that this album alone sowed the seeds for that 80s rock phenomenon, what we kind of think of as 80s rock. But in the 70s, it was just another flavour of the same genre. As was this one here. I'm not one of my favourite albums. I know this album comes up a lot in greatest albums of the 70s. I can take it or leave it, really. I mean, The Chain, Don't Stop, and Go Your Own Way. 3 good tracks. After that, I'm struggling to really kind of name anything I like off the album. But nevertheless, it is a massively influential rock album of the 70s, and sounds absolutely nothing like anything else that we've discussed on the list today. And then, what about this one from 1979? Outlandos de Moor by The Police. Roxanne, Can't Stand Losing You, So Lonely. Rock had never sounded like this before. Was it reggae or was it rock? Well, it seemed to have a foot in both camps, but, I would call it a rock album. It's got a little bit of that sort of punky attitude about it, a little bit sort of new wave. Which, was, albums I could have chosen here. I seem to have skated over in my random choice of, punk albums. You could talk about Nevermind the Bollocks or London Calling as being great 70s rock albums as well. And again, massively different from anything else that was around at the time and was also getting called rock music. And then we rounded off the decade, 1979, with this, okay? The album that produced the last UK Christmas #1 single of the 1970s. That's a good pub trivia one that you can always pull out of the hat. Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 made it to #1 over Christmas in 1979. Again, think of another 70s rock album. Think of another rock album from any era of rock music that sounds remotely like Pink Floyd's The Wall. 10 albums, let's look at them again. Black Sabbath, Paranoid. Led Zeppelin 4. Can't Buy a Thrill, Steely Dan. Tubular Bells, Mike Oldfield. Supertramp, Crime of the Century. Queen, A Night at the Opera. Boston by Boston. Rumours by Fleetwood Mac. Outlander Stamur by The Police, and The Wall by Pink Floyd. 10 albums that are all very, very definitely rock albums, and they all come from the 1970s. Can you think of another decade where you can just randomly choose 10 rock albums and you'll have that diversity of choice? I think I would struggle. Let me know what you think down in the comments, but that's the video for today, folks. Let me know your thoughts on this, and as ever, if you've enjoyed the video, please hit the subscribe button and notification bell if you haven't already done so, and why not drop me a like as well while you're at it. And of course, don't forget the live stream every Friday 5 PM UK time, where we drink beer and talk about stuff, probably great rock albums of the 70s in tomorrow's live stream. But it's a great way to kick off the weekend, and I'd love to see you there if you can make it. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.